public.
That's
Yeah.
it, yeah. Um, so it should start now. So yeah, welcome to another CorkDev. It's our last one of the year, and we've got DC and Peter Kelly here today. Peter from Tigera, DC from God. DC,
Everywhere.
will you ever explain what you're doing to people?
No, because it's classified. Yeah, no. So look, people know me really as some guy who used to hang around Trustif and Teamwork as chief marketing officer. 5 years ago, I founded Republic of Work in Cork, and last year I decided to get a grown-up job again, and I moved away from the day-to-day in Republic of Work. And right now, I'm basically working with a kind of a bunch of different startups, including one 7-year-old startup. I'm doing some work, in particular with Dogpatch Labs in Dublin, around national ecosystem stuff. So stuff that kind of works across Dogpatch, Republic of Work, RDI Hub, Ludgate, Portershed, and Orma Bats in Belfast. So.
Cool, cool. And Peter, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been around Cork for a long time now, working lots of different companies. I worked with DC back in Teamwork a long time ago. I've worked for Dell, EMC, VCE, Quest, Big Fish Games, Nginx very recently. So we got Nginx off the ground back in January 2017 in Cork, right up until they were acquired by F5 Networks recently. And I'm currently working at Tigera, which provide networking and observability solutions for Kubernetes. We set up in Cork in February of this year, so just a few months ago. We have an office that's empty at the moment because of COVID down in Penrose Dock. We've got about 25 people at the moment in Cork, so things are going pretty well.
Sounds good. And sure, I'll just do the obligatory introduction for myself. I'm
Who
James.
do you work for, James? Just I
Um,
can't put it to mind there at
oh,
the moment.
yeah, yeah. Like, yeah. I work for Zazzle now at the moment, and like Tigera as well. Only fair to say, we're hiring like loads of people in Cork, and I suppose that's a great segue, DC, into the energy in Cork right now in the just in the tech and startup sector. There's loads going on, isn't there?
Oh, it's mad. We've, as we all know, we've been through good times and bad times and every other kind of times in Cork. Where we were successful, we were not successful, where we were building great companies. For a couple of years there, we were building great companies, and then they were heading off to Dublin or heading off to London or heading off to the States. But I think the great kind of leveler that was the pandemic, it kind of put people in a situation where, if you built a startup in Cork in the last 2 years, you had no choice. You have to stay in Cork. You can't up and shift anywhere. So therefore, you've had some really interesting stuff show up in the last couple of years where they've just gotten used to. I mean, the funny thing is I suppose with remote, you're kind of it's going to get very hard to be able to define, well, what is a Cork startup and not a Cork startup. If is it that the founders are Cork based? Is it that the headquarters? In a world with no offices, it's kind of geography is history, as Liam Casey always says. But look, it's there's a lot of cool stuff going on. You've got another kind of cool thing at the moment is for the first time for a lot of startups that need to raise money or that need to go down the investment route. There's an awful lot of money around because obviously you have all these high net worth individuals who didn't get to buy property for the last couple of years and are now they're now kind of sold on the idea of startups being good investments. So you're seeing kind of all the pieces come together. I mean, much like the two of you guys in your day jobs, the problem everywhere is talent. The problem
Yeah.
everywhere is, where am I going to get staff? I had a really interesting call this week with some of the guys behind the new software engineering course in UL, which if anybody hasn't looked at, basically John Collison designed a software engineering course.
No, we've lost you there, DC. Cliffhanger there on a s-
The
oh, you're back.
Collisons and all these guys all funding and running it, you know. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think next year is going to be an awesome year. I think for Ireland, but very specifically for Cork.
excellent. And do you wanna drop any names there? Just of
So
some great
yeah,
companies on the way.
yeah. So actually, this Friday, actually, and at lunchtime, there's 18 companies from all over Ireland on that, and actually, there's about 5 or 6 of them Cork-based companies. So there's
Oh no, no. We've lost DC. So will he? Okay, he's on the way back in.
hey, I'm
We
back.
lost. Yeah, yeah. We lost you there. So there's something happening tomorrow with
Oh,
18
so
companies.
Friday, the NDRC pre-accelerator demo show is on. There's 18 startups from all over Ireland. They're all very early stage, but of those 18, I think there's about 6 of them. There's about 50% of them non-Dublin, and I think the large percentage of the non-Dublin ones are Cork ones. So you've got people like Peckish, who are doing a really interesting thing with food delivery and menu searching. You've got a crowd called Teletherapy, who are doing voice and psychiatry stuff. Who else is on that? Kuega, who my old comrade in trust of Chris Kennedy is involved in. So they're doing a platform for, I guess, global product procurement. So there's a young fella, David Sloan, who used to play for Cove Ramblers, is doing a startup called Cambrian. You're getting this real mix of kind of like, how would I put it? Young folk, 20 odd age group. But then what you're also seeing, which is very interesting, is for the first time ever, we're seeing people leave some of the bigger companies like Apple and Dell and some of the cyber companies in particular to develop their own products, which is definitely has always been a missing piece of the puzzle. We were never very good at kind of convincing people to leave their safe jobs to develop software products. So I think you'll see the first 3 months of next year. I think you'll see a lot of. I always hate this fucking stealth startups thing, but you'll see a couple of in the first 3 months of next year, a couple of really interesting, and I would say quite nerdy. Like there's a couple of Web3 startups that have gotten started in Cork, and I won't spoil their surprise now by outing them. But yeah, you're going to see some some infrastructure type stuff, some Web3 stuff, even a crypto project or two, all kick off in Cork in the first 3 months of next year.
Cool, cool. Um, and while you mention Web3, right?
Yeah,
I haven't gone in depth into it, right?
yeah,
And I think the best synopsis for the kind of, let me see, the cynic here is
yeah.
Web3 is really, really good marketing for
Oh yeah,
cryptocurrency. And it's just like, it's crypto and they're calling it Web3. But is there more to it?
yeah. I mean, so yes and no. This is a bit like going back to the old school thing of all the great technologies in all the great technologies on the web were created for the porn industry. You know what I mean, around payments and all this sort of stuff. Like,
Mm,
I heard the other day a really really good example of Web3, right? Which is people were talking about Adele is doing some sort of a residency in Las Vegas, and apparently the tickets went on sale, and instantly the price of the tickets was going up. The scalp market was 5 grand, 20 grand, and even 30 grand now for tickets. And basically, the example that somebody put to me was, imagine if instead of selling somebody a ticket, you basically sold them an NFT, and
mm,
that NFT entitled them to go to the concert. But essentially, you could shape that NFT with a smart contract sitting on it that basically said this NFT can't be resold for more than 10% of its ticket of above its current value. and then basically you create a scenario where you've eliminated ticket scalping. So
Mm.
I think it's not. I'm not the biggest fan in the world of cryptocurrency. I don't get it because I think money needs to be regulated. But what I'm a huge fan of is smart contracts, and I think the ability to create entities that where you remove the control but you still maintain the rule set. I think we're going to be surprised. Like I think you're going to see a lot of uses for them in things like social enterprises. So instead now of just making a donation to a charity, you know, you're basically buying a token. You get some benefits off the ownership of that token. If you no longer want to support that charity, you can sell that token on. And it's not about personal profit, but it's about creating these little finance ecosystems and these little smart contract environments. I think the crypto thing will actually be a kind of a separate thing off here. I don't, in my head, actually, I know they are the same thing, but I kind of keep them separate because I think, yes, right now, Web3 is being used to sell an awful lot of shady crypto stuff. And I know from talking to investors, one of the biggest frustrations among investors at the moment is people pitching Web3 stuff to them. And when they ask to see product, like there's nothing built. So there's all these guys going out there pitching ideas, we've got a white paper on how we're going to use crypto to do this. But actually, what actually we now need developers to kind of get it and start working out what are the languages, what are the platforms, how are we going to actually turn these ideas into product? And I think once that thing starts coming, that's when Web3 gets interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sounds good. Um, and like, do you think, like, on the smart contract thing and NFTs, do you think there's a place for NFTs with like vaccine certs and things like that, just for validating that they're real or whatever, not forged?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another example. Like, I think the problem at the moment, I suppose, is the NFTs that are getting all the internet love are I'm scribbling a picture of a monkey. Yeah, like it's NFTs in the art world, and it's turned into this mad, completely ridiculous thing. And the new easiest scam in the world. You sell the NFT to yourself, and because all the transactions are being recorded on the blockchain, it looks like there's a lot of activity being generated around your piece of art, and really it's just yourself pulling off the scam.
Mm.
That's in case anybody needs to make quick bucks for Christmas. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's the smart contracts thing because, like, or the other one, honestly, is this DAO stuff around there 2 weeks ago where you had that crowd who got together, was it 40 million to buy a copy of the U.S. Constitution? Like, they weren't successful. But I mean, suddenly, you're looking at things like, okay, so all these big problems in the world that can only be solved by money, suddenly there's a way of collecting money that where the control is decentralized. So it's not, like theoretically Ponzi schemes shouldn't be able to happen if it's all put together properly and studied properly and maintained properly. So I think there's, like, I can see smart contracts being used for an awful lot of stuff. I mean,
Mm.
I was talking to a friend of mine in Estonia the other day, and he said it's something the government are looking into. Like he said, it could be the solution to, digital ID cards. Nobody wants the government to have all these information about them. But I mean, if all that information was stored on a blockchain and had smart contracts attached to it, suddenly, the purpose of having a government digital identity would be maintained, but like the data couldn't be fucking fed into giant systems, to we're all talking about the NSA, really, aren't we? Like, yeah, the NSA, you sign up for, you want to renew your passport, you want to renew your driving license, you want to renew your dog license, that information is going to stay where it's meant to be and not, like, so I can see like smart contracts and NFTs and stuff also, being used to confirm, which I suppose is the base of Bitcoin. They provide a
Mhm.
way to confirm a set of information, if you know what I mean. But as I said, the thing about this is this stuff is all theoretical until people start actually building product on it. And like, there's a couple of things this year now. There's there's going to be two big Web3 accelerators in Ireland next year. Techstars are running one in Dublin, and there's another one going to be announced later next year as well. So it's an interesting space. Like, it's probably Christmas reading stuff for, people when they're off, is ignore the bullshit, like forget about crypto and just start getting into smart contracts and that sort of stuff. Because honestly, the one thing I can't yet work out is I can't work out what the software stack is for building product on Web3. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then onto like staying on the theme of things that I don't know a whole pile about. Security. Security, Peter, would be one of my. No, of course, I know enough about security, but you guys are experts in it and networking. Um, and actually, like on security, this Log4j thing is a right mess. Do you know much about that? Have you had much
We do.
dealings with it?
We do. So I think this is a good segue actually, because it's getting a lot of press at the moment. So it's all over Twitter. You can't really avoid it if you work in tech. And it's just the latest vulnerability. It's a pretty scary one because of remote code execution in Java, which was probably seemed like a good idea at the time when they were designing Java. But the kind of trend here really is around supply chain security. So a lot of us, when we're building our applications and they're running through our CI/CD systems, we're pulling in a lot of third-party dependencies. We may have a scanner running. If you're fairly serious about it, you might have something like FOSSA or Snike running that's scanning your Docker images, scanning the layers that are building up your Docker image for known vulnerabilities. So 99% of attacks and containers come from known vulnerabilities. So you can stop these, you can prevent it. But you have to take it seriously. And a lot of people and a lot of places that I've worked in, you kind of pay lip service in CI/CD in the build time. If you get a report where there's some vulnerability found in your image, it doesn't really block you deploying and moving ahead with either merging your code to master or actually deploying into production in continuous deployment, continuous integration systems. So I think that's going to be taken a lot more seriously now. When you get a report from one of these tools that tells you have a vulnerability that will actually block you from deploying to production. So I think that's going to be a big trend. So supply chain security is going to be something, it's like so hot right now. You're going to hear a lot about it next year. It's not just build time either, it's runtime as well. So for example, in Kubernetes, for a vulnerability like Log4j, if that's in a built container that you've deployed onto a container orchestration system, like previously you might have gone and patched your server where you know that you have this vulnerability present. Now you might have 10,000 containers running over 100 nodes and continually being deployed in real time as you're trying to patch it as well. So it becomes whack-a-mole sometimes when you're trying to fix these vulnerabilities in production. So you're going to see a lot of tools being built around runtime mitigation as well as build time. And with containers, like there's a whole pile of things that can go wrong in production at runtime. So it kind of becomes like this big thing, zero trust. So you don't trust your own stuff, even though you're inside like the circle of trust, the nice safe zone in the middle. You still shouldn't trust anything that you're doing. The volumes that you're mounting in your containers, what system calls they're making, and things like that. So you'll see supply chain security at build time, runtime, and then like this whole zero trust model. So it's going to be taken a lot more seriously. And there's companies being built just around this use case, solely around this use case. Very successful enterprise-focused companies, just focused on zero trust and this type of mitigation. So.
Okay. And then like Kubernetes in general, I presume that's going to just continue its boom. There's probably nothing to stop it, or no other viable alternative really, is there?
I think so, yeah. Resistance is futile, I think. But I think you'll see a lot of it kind of disappearing behind the scenes as well, like in terms of like the big trend that we're seeing with our users and our customers is managed services. So there's a big shift. 90% of Kubernetes users use a managed service. So that's like a AKS, EKS, GKE. So Google, AWS, and Azure provided managed Kubernetes platforms, so you don't have to go and deploy it yourself and manage Kubernetes yourself. Because Kubernetes is complex; it's a beast. A trend in Kubernetes is trying to make it simpler, and there's things like K3S and all of these other efforts to make Kubernetes a single binary, make it easier to understand. But I think from a user point of view, you'll see it getting more and more abstracted away behind managed services, and even serverless as well, of course. So why stop there? Like, why not just get rid of the server altogether? So I think that continued trend is going to keep going. And another big trend in Kubernetes is OpenShift's not going anywhere either. So it's OpenShift's a whole other beast, a whole other animal from Red Hat. But large enterprises love it because they need to pay for software. They don't want open source software running in their, in HSBC or one of these big banks for compliance reasons. They need to pay for software, so they love OpenShift. There's SLAs. There's like a neck to choke if something goes wrong. So OpenShift continues to see a lot of growth, a lot of adoption, and it's a tricky one. It's a complex beast as well. So they're kind of the big things that I see in Kubernetes. And just to go back to what DC was saying earlier, hiring is really tough at the moment. It's a nightmare really. In Cork at the moment, we have I think the problem is we run out of local talent very quickly, natively in Cork. So then you start reaching for remote within Ireland or possibly relocating people much quicker than we used to. At least that's my sense anyway. I'm not sure about you, James, but like if you look at even going beyond like 5-6 people in engineering now, specifically I'm talking about in software engineering, you tend to have to pull the trigger on getting people relocated here much sooner than we used to. So there's like a carousel of companies in Cork that people kind of move around from, and then once you run out of that talent pool, you're kind of looking at like we've already hired people in South America and India, and we're only 8 months into growing out the site in Tigera. So it's a little bit worrying for Cork, for Ireland, I think in general, if some of the bigger multinationals kind of see that trend of talent drying up very quickly. So that's definitely something I'm conscious of. And actually finding somewhere for people to live in Cork is the second hardest problem. Like we have loads of offices being built everywhere, but unfortunately not a lot of apartments to go with them. So I think that's obviously a whole other topic, but it is something we're conscious of. We are relocating people here and helping them find accommodation. It's becoming a real problem in Cork. Any decent accommodation in the city centre, and they want to live in the city centre. We're hiring people in mid-20s, who don't have families and things like that. So, so that's a worrying trend. That's a difficult one to solve.
It is. It is. We could probably spend hours talking about hiring, and DC actually, like on bringing people in, especially. Like I know you've been vocal in the past, if you don't mind me saying, and I don't think there's any problem with it. In just like
No.
the government could help us a lot more. Like for all that they love
Yeah.
the multinationals, they certainly don't help indigenous startups very well. But they could put in some more supports to make like even the visa process easier.
Yeah, it's funny actually. Like one of the kind of weird things I did over the last couple of years is I joined the board of Cork Chamber of Commerce, and it's when you kind of get to peer behind the veil, you realize actually just how complicated all this stuff is. Like we did on Pete's point there, we got KPMG to audit the accounts of 2 apartment developments in Cork that were basically being built, and it turns out that the developer was going to lose money on both of them. Like you right now cannot build apartments in Cork and turn a profit on them, and that's because about a third of the money from an apartment development or from any development goes to government in terms of VAT and stuff like that. So like very easy solution there. It doesn't take a genius to work out, if the government would take less than a third of the money, and if there was profit in it, more developers would build apartments. But until something changes, literally, like the market, nothing's going to change in the market right now. So there are going to be no more apartments built until the government changes something. On the kind of general area of startups, it's funny. I was in Dublin last week on Friday talking about this very, very topic. And Paddy Walsh, actually, the CEO of Dogpatch, did an interview with David McWilliams on the weekend about Europe and Ireland and government and startups. That'll be out, I think it's the first week of January or something like that. But actually, the challenge is basically, it kind of comes down to a simple thing. Government doesn't understand the difference between SMEs and startups. Like, government doesn't understand the difference between a chip shop, a hairdresser, and somebody building a Web3 startup. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they don't realize that the great thing about startups is the high potential that's in them. Like, if you have a choice between a chip shop and a Web3 startup, the chip shop is more reliable in terms of the income stream and the tax stream that it delivers to government. The potential of the Web3 startup to deliver, a whole bunch of jobs and a huge amount of value is 10x that of the chip shop. But yet, when politicians design business policy, they treat everybody the exact same. Now, I mean, like, for all the giving out, there's no other country in the world has an entity like Enterprise Ireland. We can give out about that it's complicated process and all that sort of stuff. But they are a great entity. They do sync, this year about 1.5 billion euros will be invested in startups in Ireland in general. That's about 500 million, 600 million up on last year. Now, that ranges across the board from our old alma mater, Peter, Teamwork taking 70 million takes a chunk out of that. There's some crowd up the country raised 200 million. I know they don't count as startups, but they do count as in that fundraising bundle. But I think what's going to be really, really interesting, and we're not going to talk about politics on this call, definitely, is, like, we have been playing as the illustrious Paddy Cosgrave calls them, an FFG game for the best part of 100 years now. And if circumstances change in the next election, like, at least it's a change. At least if we don't see a change in direction in terms of how we support startups and stuff out of that, then we're never going to see it. The one thing I would say, the one upside is, at the Web Summit this year, the Ireland signed up to a thing, an EU wide initiative called the European Startup Nation Standards. And it basically is a set of rules, well worth having a look at. It's a set of rules and principles now that every government has agreed to adopt into law. And it covers things like how share option schemes are treated. Most basic one, you have to be able to set up a company in a purely digital way in less than a day for less than 100 euros. So, like, that has to now be transcribed into Irish law somehow. But there's a lot of kind of cool stuff around regulations, and that, like, a certain percentage of government procurement has to be, made available to businesses that are less than 3 years old and this sort of stuff. So, like, the question now is, those standards are there, they're well worth people having a look at. The question is, how long will it take to the various politicians to turn those into law in Ireland? And we might be waiting a while for that, I reckon.
Yeah. Maybe we need to do an A/B test in government or something. But
one thing I've seen as well, actually, just related to that is, and it's great to see it, a lot of engineers that I've worked with are becoming a lot more savvy about stock options and RSUs generally in their careers in Cork, whereas before it was not very well understood, and it wasn't really a serious part of negotiating with somebody for their package. It was more around base comp and bonuses and pension, whereas now stock options is becoming more prevalent, which is great to see. But our tax is extremely penal for RSUs in Ireland, like, even just compared to the UK. So that would be a fantastic thing to see change over time, because I think DC said this at the start as well. We don't see enough startups coming out of exits. So if you're working for a US company, a multinational, for example, but they're still private and they get acquired or they IPO, a lot of people now in Ireland, in Cork and Dublin, they'll make some money out of it. It might not be, retirement money, but it would be enough to start a company potentially. But our tax system is extremely penal around RSUs, and it's not very incentivizing for people to go off and start their own startup afterwards. I'd love to see more of that. I think it would be fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose like on the hiring thing, I suppose one thing I find is, we all know lots of really good developers, really good tech people, and I suppose we have a habit of settling in Cork. Like we tend to have long tenures in different companies. Well, some people do, some people don't, like yourself, Peter. I know I'm not saying you're hopped around like crazy, but you've done decent stints at each place, but you keep you keep moving like a shark. But I suppose, how do we like? What kind of advice could you give to people who aren't sure about taking the plunge, aren't sure about, say, they might know enough about Tigera, or they might know enough about Zazzle, or they might know enough about
Yeah.
Altada or InnoWatts. If you look, like, there's a crazy amount of companies you could join that give pretty good benefits and all of that. What extra push do you think people need?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's a brilliant question, though. It's something I think about a lot. I just keep moving around just before I get found out. Really, that's but no, I think it's about risk taking. A lot of us in Ireland were homeowners. We get mortgages very early compared to people who are a little bit more mobile in West Coast in America.
Mhm.
They're more risk taking when they're younger, in their 20s, whereas I think a lot of people still reach for mortgages and get tied down very quickly. So then they're less likely to go and take a plunge on a startup when they have a very good uh, you know a package or tenure down at somewhere like Dell. I think it is really tough to tempt people. I think it's a culture change, really, as more and more people see, like, for example, with Nginx. We had the same problem getting Nginx off the ground in Cork, even though everybody in technology would have known or heard of Nginx.
Yeah.
It's still hard to convince people to come. And you don't have some of the kind of golden handcuffs that the large companies can offer you, all the extra bells and whistles. So it's kind of a leap of faith. But I think when people see then that Nginx was acquired by F5 and people made some cash out of it and it was very successful and they went on to bigger and better things then afterwards, I think that's good. I think we can maybe use examples like that more when we're talking to people. Popaloo, another fantastic, like, local Cork story. Newsweaver and Popaloo, and what they did with the acquisition. So TrustDev, like DC said. So there's loads of examples of companies that have been worth the risk in Cork. Not just from it's not all about financials, obviously, but that is definitely a big thing for people. I think, is giving up the kind of safety net that they might have. And the other thing is, working for these small companies, you can move a lot quicker. There's 100 people in Tigera in total in the whole company. So as you can imagine, there's no bureaucracy and politics. It's about moving quickly, and that suits some people. People are attracted to the idea of having more of an impact rather than being a cog in the wheel. So they're kind of some of the things I try to convince people to leave and join us. Yeah, if I can twist their arm.
Mm, mm. It is like, there's one good question here from Tom Coonahan, where he says, "Is there any taxonomy of developers, number of skills, etc., for Cork and surrounds? Without some data like this, it's hard for a new startup to take a gamble on the city versus others." Um, and it's a great question. Like, what is Cork's skill set? I think it's kind of everything. But have we got anything, DC? I mean, you've done Tech Ireland. That kind of helps, but I
Yeah,
suppose that's more on the company level than the developer level.
yeah. Like, no, I mean, there has been stuff done on like, what skill sets are in Cork, but they're across everything. Like they're not they don't get down to is Cork an AWS or Azure city, that sort of level. And it's because it also makes it really hard. The one thing we have in Cork, which is pretty impressive, is, to be fair, we have very agile universities. It may not seem there when you're attending it, but I mean, if you look at how quickly the universities have adapted to things probably like cybersecurity and AI in particular, and I think if UCC and CIT or MTU, sorry, now are both very into engaging with industry, and if you go to them and kind of say, well, there's a gap in this in Cork. They're very quick to kind of build around that sort of stuff. But no, I mean it is one of the challenges, like that there isn't just that kind of core, like I would say, if you're not talking about developer skills, it's very obvious what Cork's strong parts are in technology, which is customer service, customer experience, sales, back office. Like that's where Cork excels. We don't have an awful lot of product. We have quite a bit of R&D in Cork, all right, like people like Oculus and people like that doing R&D in Cork. But yeah, Cork isn't a big product city outside of kind of, everybody on this call, outside of the homegrown, the Work Vivos, the Teamworks, and those sort of things who are building awesome product. But yeah, it's a tricky one to kind of go. But then what I would say is, it's not data that like I nerd out on this stuff. Don't remember the last time I saw, even for a US city, any sort of breakdown of skills at that degree. Like you do see a breakdown between kind of sectors, AI, cyber, that sort of stuff. But as to front end, back end, infrastructure, DevOps type stuff, it's always hard to see, where the gaps are and what we should be doing about it,
Yeah.
There are some data sets that we were able to use at Tigera to choose Cork. So like any company, you do due diligence on a few different locations. So it wasn't Cork wasn't the only place in the running, or Ireland for that matter. But the IDA were amazing. The amount of information that they provided to Tigera's executive team around the other type of companies, like the similar kind of cybersecurities that we have in Cork. We seem to be a big cybersecurity hub, whether by design or accident over the last few years. So that was a big thing. And then we use recruiter data sets that you can buy around skill sets, programming languages, languages in terms of spoken languages for customer support and things like that. So yeah, a lot of different data sets, but the IDA were incredibly helpful to kind of convince, or not convince, but to show kind of what we have in Cork for that era. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Another question here, kind of still about startups, of course, from Wukash is, have you seen, can you talk about any crypto or Web3 startups that are set up in Cork yet, DC? Or do we need to wait until they come out of stealth in January?
I'm not going to claim to be an expert in this space at all, but like, as I said, I just, I've come across three in particular, and the idea of a fourth one, but because I'm not involved with them in any way, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to talk about them. But there's a few interesting stuff going on. I don't know if Jason, anybody knows Jason Rowe. Jason was a big fixture on the Dublin scene for years. We transplanted him to Cork. He's a native now. But Jason and his guys are doing some very interesting stuff around Web3 and crypto and crowdfunding and that sort of stuff. And that's not really a startup. That's a well-oiled, fully functioning machine. But what they're building could have very significant applications for crowdfunding across Europe. Like they're applying for all the licensing and regulatory requirements stuff to do this stuff properly. So they're not going to be rebels. fucking, he'll murder me. I can't think of the name of it now. Plan something. But I Jason Rowan, anyway. Google it.
He should be watching anyway, and he should be leaving comments
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
But anyway,
yeah.
the
Plug, Jason, plug.
I suppose the other thing is for people who are just interested in what's going on. I saw DC, you've got your Built in Cork final startup event happening on
Christmas
Christmas
drinks.
Eve. Christmas drinks, yeah,
BYO drink.
yeah, which is good. I mean,
Yeah,
I guess anyone is welcome to that, and it's probably a good idea
yeah,
even just to listen in and
yeah.
sit in
I
the corner of
apologize.
with your.
Normally, we'd convince whoever had the biggest fundraising round or whoever had the biggest checkbook of the year. Usually, a Dan Kiley or Pat Phelan or Liam Casey or somebody would pick up the drinks tab in Electric. But sadly, you'll have to buy your own beer and just drink it in your kitchen or whatever. But I mean, look, what I would say is I love this time of year because what you find, and I think it's a very Cork thing. I mean, most Cork people don't like being overseas for Christmas. They kind of come home. So that week actually between Christmas Day and New Year's Day is a really interesting week in Cork because you have all these people from all over the world who've been involved in this, that, and the other thing, all kind of home for a few days. And like some of the most interesting copies of the year, like last year, I met a girl who was she was the European marketing manager for Deliveroo, and she was from Bishopstown, and just all these random people come, and it's a great time of year to be just kind of building up networks and stuff like that. So like that's why we always try and on Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock. Like normally it's like let's have a quick pint in Electric, and it's usually 50, 60, 70 people. We have to do it virtually, obviously, because of COVID this year round. But still, there's no big complicated agenda. We'll all be on a Zoom call. Some of us will be sober. Some of us may not be sober. But it might be a bit of crack.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like I'll try and make it. I've Christmas Eve off,
It's
so
also, you see, it was also a great excuse. You could claim that it was your last business meeting of the year, and you got to go into Electric and hang out with the guys and girls, for an hour. But sadly, when it's virtual, it doesn't work as easy for that as an excuse for why you're not putting up the Christmas tree.
yeah, yeah. But it would be great. I think it would be great. I'd love to see next year. I suppose my Christmas wish is that Built in Cork would come back, and that maybe we'd start to put together a directory of all of the opportunities that are out there because it's really difficult to keep track of them. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn will drive you mad, but
Oh
it
yeah.
is good, but it will drive you mad, and not
I'll
everything
tell
is
you.
there. It's
No, and I'll tell you, it's a very funny thing. It's a very Cork specific thing because obviously with the stuff that I'm doing with Dogpatch at the moment, I'm doing a lot of stuff in Galway and even Limerick. Limerick is going to be a big, big city next year. They're getting a new startup hub. They're getting this new software engineering course that's just everybody in Silicon Valley is either involved in or talking about. There's a couple of really interesting startups taking off there. Waterford has had a great couple of years. In terms of new VC funds that from Barry and the guys in who when they exited Feed Henry, some nice startups, Arc Labs down there doing very well, Orma Bats in Belfast do very well. The challenge in Cork is that Dublin functions really well as an ecosystem because it's multiple ecosystems. So you've got a whole thing around DCU, and then you've got a whole thing around say Dogpatch Labs in the Dockland. And then you got a whole thing around Guinness Enterprise Centre, and they almost operate as kind of three teams within the one city. The problem in Cork is like where if you go to Galway's small enough that everyone knows everyone, and the problem in Cork is that we're somewhere in between where you have these different groups that are doing different things, but Cork is still big enough that like not everybody knows everybody else. So yeah, like one of my big things for next year, now that I know I'm going to be here all year and not doing any moving around the place, is to try and kind of go, yeah, like where's that one fucking place that I can like when because it's that experience. Like if you get on a plane today and you go to Seattle and you're stuck in Seattle for a week on business, you can Google and find out, oh, actually, there's a startup gig on Tuesday night. I'll just walk along to it. Like you
Mm.
actually can't, even in Dublin, Dublin has Startup Digest, all the events into one place. So like that's my Christmas project is, how from January on can we have all the events in the one place? Because like you can talk about networking and building startups and all that sort of stuff. If we all can't find each other, that's that's the first point of failure in everything. So hopefully next year, and look, hopefully COVID will sort itself out. We'll be able to do more. The golden era of startups in Cork was always when all the smart people were socializing. You were getting all the developers and the kind of more salesy marketing people and all the people working in the multinationals all getting together for a pint or two, and it was the conversation. Like pretty much every successful startup out of Cork started at a bar counter somewhere, which is a terrible indictment of us, but that's just the truth.
Yeah, yeah. How bad? Yeah, we can't get near the bar counters now, sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. And Peter, like as we kind of start to wrap up, Peter, like, are ye hiring a lot more? Like, what kind of what's the kind of people that you're looking for? Just seeing we're talking about hiring, and people might have their ears up now about it.
Yeah, there's a good mix really. So it's like a full site. So you have it's not just engineering. So we do have engineering. So we're hiring for multiple different teams. Container security is one of them. Also Calico Cloud, which is our SaaS platform. So different skill sets even within engineering. If you have a SaaS background, there's a team for that. If you're more into Linux networking, low level kernel development, even C development with our eBPF data plane, you can go all the way down deep that way if you want to. So lots of different kind of roles in engineering. It's almost all Golang, 99% Go, a little bit of C, mostly open source, and it's actually open source. So most of the code that we've written so far since February has been in our open source repos. Small percentage in our enterprise repos, which is great. That attracts a lot of developers. So yeah, kind of an open source mindset and some of these languages. That's what we're looking for. Really, it's about culture fit then for startups. Actually, very good work life balance, but you do kind of have a different mindset at a startup, I think. So it can be a little bit chaotic at times. Process can be still developing. So that's kind of something we look for. In terms of the other roles, then we have customer success engineers. So they kind of wear like a lot of different hats. These guys are probably even more knowledgeable about the entire product than the software engineers. And they're the guys who deal with our customers in terms of professional services, training, escalations, and keeping the lights on for our customers. Big pre-sales team. So typically we have SDR, BDRs, marketing, generating and qualifying all of our leads at the top of the funnel. And we have account executives and pre-sales solutions architects doing POCs. So it's quite high touch for a lot of our enterprise customers. It can take quite a time to get over the line. Big deal sizes, but quite a long, high touch kind of sales process. It could be months in some cases. A lot of POCs with companies before they'll sign on the dotted line. So big pre-sales team. Function overall in the company. Content marketing, we're hiring tech writers, we're hiring recruiters, so a bit of everything. Yeah, so it's all up on the website if people are interested. But yeah, I think we have 14 open roles, something like that. We're planning to double the size of the whole office in Cork next year. Office in terms of number of people that we have. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And just to plug our own roles here in Zazzle, it's like the first. I think it's great because it is the first time engineering has been done outside of Silicon Valley for Zazzle. Zazzle's been around for a good while now, and it's pretty successful. And we're just looking for like we're kind of language agnostic. When you get in here, we use certain languages and certain frameworks, but as we're hiring, we're just happy to talk to anyone because programming, as I've learned over the years, you could be coding away and you forget about which language you're using. You just kind of get into it, which is the great thing. So yeah, I'm just trying to build up a bit of a team. kind of have
You
have a
just want
target.
friends, James. You just want nice people to talk to about succession every morning and
Well, yeah,
what
yeah,
happened
yeah.
in billions and all that. Like,
Yeah, I haven't started Billions yet, but I'm in the middle of season 3 of Succession, and yeah, exactly. I'm tired of Twitter. I just need people in here now. But it's great stuff that we're building, and I think that's the thing. I couldn't look at any other company and say, oh, they're not as good as what Zazzle is offering. Cork has like never had such in my, I don't know how long I've been here, maybe 24 years I've been living in Cork now, and it's never been like this. There's
no.
never been so much opportunity. It's crazy.
I remember Zazzle actually when we kicked off Republic of Work. Zazzle kind of moved into their offices around the corner there in Guinness House, I always call it. But like for the first 3 years of Republic of Work, Zazzle used to rent our event space office every Thursday for their company yoga. And I remember thinking, and like literally, you'd have a big gang would come over every week to do the yoga, and our members would join in and stuff like that. And apparently, he started off with having a yoga room, and obviously, because the company was growing so fast, you made that. I would have loved to have been in that meeting where the decision that had to be made was: do we keep the yoga room or do we outsource the yoga room? Like, but it's you're dead right. Like, it's. I mean, look from that point of view, developers are spoiled for choice. But I think, with the respect, with just knowing a little bit, guys, about both your companies, there's a lot of companies in Cork who are just looking to hire developer talent and give them a paycheck. The one great thing about the two businesses you're involved in is that it's meaningful work. You're not a tiny, as Peter said earlier, you're not a tiny cog in the machine. Like the shit that you're building, gets deployed, becomes a core part stuff, and what every developer loves to hear. If you fuck it up, has the danger of taking a global entity offline, for a set period of time. So if
Yeah,
you want to also experience the stress of a global outage, I would heartily encourage you to work for either of the lads' companies.
it makes you feel alive. It's good. It's
It
good.
does, yeah.
Thanks a million for your time today, guys. It's been really good
You're
talking.
welcome.
I could keep going
Yeah,
forever, but I suppose we all have jobs to go back to as well.
lunch and jobs.
Um,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I'm kind of getting hungry too. But thanks a million. Any parting words from either of you before we hang up?
No, look. Honestly, I just think everybody should be excited about next year because whether you're working, whether you're thinking about a startup, whether you're whatever you're doing, next year is going to be like COVID or no COVID, regardless of what happens. There's enough stuff going on behind the scenes, both locally, nationally, and internationally, that like 2022 is going to be a really exciting year in technology in general. And I just think everybody should be fucking pumped up. Like, it's going to be a cool year. And the trick is like we need to just make sure that as much of that energy and excitement is around Cork as possible.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Thanks,
Cool.
guys.
Thanks a million,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll talk to you again sometime next year.
Talk to you. That's it. Bye.
Cheers.
Take care.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Bye. Bye.